Hello and welcome to the Virtual Light broadcast. What would you do if you found yourself caught up in a harrowing armed robbery with a gun to your head? Well, that's precisely what happened to today's guest, Australian healer and spiritual teacher Shavasti. And it was such a pivotal moment in his life that in fact it opens his new book, which is called Embracing the Power of Truth, Tools for Liberating Your Heart. Shavasti is a healer and spiritual teacher with 20 years' experience working with groups and individuals globally. His work spans many disciplines, including energy medicine, shamanism, and satsang. For more than a decade, he's been considered an authority in the field of family constellations and ancestral healing, and he's authored 4 books under the name of John L. Payne. Shavasti, welcome to the Virtual Light broadcast.
Hi. Hello, good morning. It's good morning to you from here because I'm actually in Thailand at the moment. I think you said I was an Australian healer. I'm not. I'm British, actually.
Oh, I thought
yes.
Gail said you were Australian. Never mind.
I was there a few weeks ago, but I'm not actually from there originally,
Okay.
although I do recognize I have a bit of a mixed accent because I have lived in lots of different countries
Well, the
across the
interesting thing
world.
is that we're actually proving there's no such thing as time. For us, it's the afternoon. For you, it's the morning.
Absolutely, it's 5:30 in the morning here. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's just a measurement.
Yes, indeed. Indeed.
So tell us about that incident that was so pivotal in your life. I mean, what was it like to be in the midst of an armed robbery with a gun to your head?
Well, it was harrowing, to say the least. Really, the pivotal part of it was the moment in which the gunman said to me, "I'm going to kill you now." And I could feel the gun up against my temple, and the thought came to me of, is this going to hurt? How quick will it be? And in that split second, and I really, from that moment, I really do understand when people say my whole life flashed before me, because that's exactly what happened. And there was a moment there where I heard a very loud booming voice, which was not the gunman's, it was a voice that came in from the right-hand side of my head. And the voice called me by name and said, "Do you wish to live?" However, my answer was not an immediate yes. There was a pause that seemed to last for an eternity, in which I considered my life, and I looked at my life, and I was 45 at the time, so I'm now 53. And there was a part of me that would have been quite happy to leave. There was a part of me that was feeling tired, and then all of a sudden, from inside me, welled up this great longing for the things I was yet to do, the books I was yet to write. And one of the things that came up was that I did not want to leave the planet until I really knew what love is. I really wanted to know what that is on every single level. And so the moment that I felt that, and then I said back to the voice in my mind, the voice, the very loud, masculine, booming voice that I'd heard, and I said, "Yes, I want to live." Then the gunman withdrew the gun and said, "I'm not in the mood for murder tonight," and laughed and walked away, and simply walked away. And so that moment changed my life forever, because I knew that I'd been party to and part of a miraculous event. This took place in South Africa, and very clearly from a statistical point of view, I should in fact be dead, but I'm not. And so I survived that. And in the days to come afterwards, I had a very unusual relationship to reality. Everything seemed very new. And so part of that was the trauma of recovering from that, which took quite a long time. It took months, if not a year or two, actually. And then a whole new perception of reality that stayed with me. So that's really how it started. The experience of there was an intervention, and I made a very clear choice, yes, I want to live. And then an event that was almost certain to have one outcome, with my death had a completely different outcome, and in a way that was bizarre. It's still strange to me today that somebody would laugh and say, I'm not in the mood for murder today, and just walk off. That's what happened.
So you were already on a spiritual path. You were a teacher long before then. How did that experience inform your work or change your work?
What happened was that I went through this enormous heartbreaking process. I literally walked away from everything that I'd had. Earlier that year, a partner had died. A very close friend had also died. In fact, they died about 10 days apart. My dogs had been, two of my dogs had been killed in previous burglaries. So there was an awful lot of loss, and culminating really in walking out of my beautiful home. I'd had a farmhouse which I'd converted into a very exquisite home. And so what I thought that I had was then no more. And so there was this process of really getting in contact with a deeply broken heart. And in the process of breaking and shattering and breaking and shattering and just simply leaving and finding myself in China on my own and not knowing anybody there, something new started to emerge, a deeper appreciation, a deeper experience of compassion. And so I really had to go into my shadow and in the dark side in a way that I'd never been before, because the feelings that emerged the day after the robbery were ones of spite, vengeance, a real need to punish and hurt those who had hurt me back. And I had to deal with those feelings as well, and I didn't act out on them, otherwise I'd be in prison today and not actually where I am. And so it began a whole transformation where we lose everything. The only thing that we're left with is our very own self and our very own heart. And that is really the process that started. It was rebirth by fire.
Well, it's interesting. You'd said that I don't want to die. I want to really know what love is. And then you get your heart shattered wide open.
Absolutely.
So you start your new book with that story. How the whole book is about awakening the heart. What are you giving people in that book to help them awaken their hearts?
Well, the vast majority of us, and myself included, and I catch myself doing it now from time to time in small ways. Human beings were programmed to avoid discomfort. We're programmed to avoid pain at all costs. And so what I've learned through this entire process, especially when I was in China and learning Qigong and Tai Chi, was that in the doing of nothing, of the not running, of the not escaping, of being still, instead of avoiding the discomfort, I had been very much guilty of being a light chaser. I thought, well, if I followed positive thinking, if I followed the feel-good factor, then somehow if I got enough of that goodness, then that would rub off. And what I began to discover is that I really needed to meet at a very fundamental level the lies I believed about myself and that I had told about myself. And so that really comes down to looking at what is it, if we could name one thing, that we have spent our entire lives avoiding or running from, one particular feeling, what is it? And so the tool that I offer is to simply stay. Don't run, don't avoid, stay with what is actually present. And so, particularly in Western culture, because we have the teaching of original sin that's been part of us for 50, 60 generations, it's this notion that somehow we're bad is being passed to us like a baton in a relay race. And so it's really about tools for meeting the self-hatred that causes us to chase after the light, which often is not authentic at all. what we do is we tend to build and add on a whole new personality, call it the spiritualized ego. So what I'm offering is something quite different, is to look at the absolute truth of how we feel about ourselves in order to discover what's really there. And when we allow ourselves to have a healthy relationship to being wrong, and when we allow it to be true, if just for a moment that we're worthless, then something else has an opportunity to be discovered if we don't run, if we stay with it, if we be still with it. So that is what I'm offering in the unfolding of the book.
So how would we know when our heart is awakened or liberated?
Connection.
We would feel a connection.
We all thrive on connection. It's not just connection to the heart, but connection to all things. One of the greatest riches that's come into my life is my relationship to all life. It's in the realization that a stone and a tree have personality, they have essence, they have consciousness, they have awareness. And one of the greatest things, I'd still chuckle to myself remembering the moment of, it was one of those moments of when we believe that we're discovering something new, but then there's also this realization of a naivety as well. I remember the very first time I became aware not only of the essence of a tree and the consciousness within a tree, but that the tree was curious about me. That it had curiosity as to my presence and my awareness and my perception of it. And so my whole life has opened up with connections to many more different types of people, many more people, and also those who are non-human. Not only in the non-physical world in terms of the spirit world and the ancestral world, but also in terms of frogs and fish and trees.
Now,
connection.
You're a specialist in family constellations and transgenerational or ancestral healing. There seems to be a theme in your books, from what I can gather, of truth. Truth being one of the most important things that we should seek. Why is ancestry so important to healing? Are we carrying what we think is a truth that actually isn't our truth?
Absolutely. You see, we're not born into this clean slate. We get born into a story that is already being told. So we get born into a script that has already been written, and we're getting born into an active, alive dialogue. And that wording is very important, that we are born into a story that's currently being told. And so we arrive, and then on the next page, and Sandi was born, and Shavasti was born, and Fred was born, and Philippa was born. And so part of the story is the family legacy, or the family story of who we are. Oh, we're survivors of the war. We're survivors of this terrible tragedy. We are butchers, bakers, bankers, candlestick makers, and all of the women in our family, we're all this, and all the men of the family, we're all that. And so there's religious, there's ethnic, there's cultural, there's national, there are all sorts of identities that go on, plus there are loyalties. And one of the stories could be, well, none of the women in this family have ever been happily married. Or bad luck always visits the Smith family. And so there are stories that we are born into, tragedies that we're born into, and we feel very keenly the traumas of mum and dad. And we often live those out as if they are our own. And we have loyalties to their losses and their suffering. It takes a very courageous child to be happier than their own parents.
Very true. But it's not just the family, is it? I mean, not just the family, the lineage that has the story, it's the culture too.
Absolutely. So there are cultural stories, national stories, ethnic stories, religious stories, and ancestral stories.
So
and
how do we
ancestral
heal them?
spirits. First of all, it's about becoming conscious of our loyalties. For instance, if we're able to say, "Dear Mother, please bless me if I have the courage to be happier than you." Just even saying that sentence for some people, it makes them cringe, as if somehow I am being selfish. Now, I don't have children, but those people I know and have worked with who do have children, on a conscious level, they want their children to thrive, in fact, even do better than themselves. That's not true for every parent, because some of us are unfortunate enough to be born to very narcissistic parents. So that can happen too. But on the whole, our ancestors want us to thrive. And so it's through being still with and becoming aware of our body's reaction and our body's response, our breathing's response to things like, "Please bless me if I have the courage to be happier than you. Dear Father, please bless me if I have more than you." Perhaps you have a sister who is disabled and lives in a wheelchair. Perhaps you have a brother who's mentally ill. Perhaps you have a mother who had lifelong depression. Perhaps your ancestors escaped and survived the Holocaust or some other major event. How is it then for you to be free to thrive without keeping your life and your light small? This is a great challenge for us.
Yeah, I can see that. And it's also the guilt that one carries from all those things. You know, how can we possibly be happier than somebody who suffered in the Holocaust? You know, it wouldn't be right. That's what we carry with us.
Yes, we carry the feeling that wouldn't be right. However, what needs to be asked, what would honor that suffering the most? To live as if we too are dead? To live in limitation? Or to say, "Grandmother, great-grandmother, in honor of you, I shall thrive. I shall thrive in honor of you."
Do you think it's really as simple as that?
No, to be honest.
So what else is
Because-
required?
Well, it's going beyond the mind. These concepts are pretty easy to teach. They're very easy to understand once you explain them, and they're easy to understand because the body responds in a way, and our emotional body responds in a way to say, yes, it's true. We always know when we hear truth. And it's always about, in each moment, being aware that we have a saboteur that lives within us, that we have this belief, this notion that if I go into the dark in order to rescue my mother, my father, my brother, my ex-wife, etc., or ex-husband, etc., or this good friend who is stuck, if I go into the dark to find them, then I'll be able to rescue them and pull them out. But that's not actually true. It doesn't work. What ends up is that we end up getting stuck. There's another part to it as well, which is why we also get very entangled in the suffering of our parents. And that is because their traumas disabled their ability and limited their ability to be in the full flow of love from grandparents to parents to children. And so therefore we have the hidden hope that if I get close to mother's depression, if I get close to father's violence, if I get close to my family's losses, if I join them in that, then perhaps they will be able to see me.
Yes.
Or if I carry my mother's depression, then I will be equal to her in some way. And then maybe finally she will see me and give me what it is that I need. So there's a bit of bargaining that goes on there, and it's about coming to the realization of that. The great writer and teacher Almas uses the expression, or coined the expression, merging love. And so as we come into this world, this is what fills us, to be brought into the original Holy Trinity of Mother, Father, and Child, to be brought into that merging love. However, it's the histories of our families and the histories of our nations and the histories of individuals that then curtail their ability to be able to bring us into that merging love in a way that is unhindered, that allows absolute flow of love from parent to child. And so when we notice that there's something amiss, we say, Mum, I'll carry that for you. I'll carry the deep disappointment that your first love died in the Second World War, and that you ended up with a husband that you're not really happy with. I'll carry that disappointment for you, because if I carry that or help you carry that, then I will get closer to you, and then I will continually attempt to get the love from you that you've not been able to give me. And so that's the great deception that we get involved in. And so part of this process is coming to truth and self-realization, the knowledge of who we are and what it is that we're trying to bargain for. The ego always wants to bargain for something. And to come to that place of knowing and experiencing that all of the love that we need lives right here, right now, in the sacred heart, which for me is the abode of God. And to unhook ourselves, not in terms of go away, Mother, but to unhook ourselves in knowing I have everything that I need here. And you know, that little thin slither, if it was a thin slither of love that I did receive from Mum and Dad, or that piece of pie, I'm going to bow to that with deep respect and say, you know, that was enough. That was enough, and I'm enough. That's part of the process.
So is it a process that you have to be present with someone to take them through, or is it a process that people can learn from your book and do it for themselves?
I think there are some individuals who are able to do that for themselves that need no help whatsoever. But I would say the vast majority of us need help, because this cannot be done in the mind. And we have to be fearless and courageous. And so if you've been a long time meditator and you're accustomed to sitting with what is, then you will recognize many of the things that I've spoken about, and therefore there are many elements of this that we can do ourselves. However, usually somebody else, or at least the hand of grace, is required. There are some things that are too big for us. Some things that are too big for us. For instance, the grief of the world, the tragedy of the world. And whenever I've met that myself, I've always experienced the hand of grace being with me. And of course, a lot of what I teach, I have also experienced in the presence of my own teachers over the years. So the answer is really yes and no. It really depends on who you are. But it is really important to say that this cannot be done in the mind. This is not an intellectual process. Understanding this is not going to give you what you're looking for. It's actually going through the absolute experience of it in a very real and, if you like, raw way.
Before we close, Shavasti, you published several books in the name of John L. Payne, and now you're called Shavasti. Was it that experience that made you change your name? Did it open you up to another part of yourself?
I was given the name back in 1994, and I had huge resistance to it. First of all, I thought it was silly, and then it just became my own personal little secret. And it's a name that I was comfortable with when visiting ashrams. And so after the robbery, as this newness emerged from me, it became clearer and clearer and clearer that I was to live by my spiritual name, that it represents more of who I am than the name that I was born with. But the name means the one who has the power to transform. And so I've been through a very deeply transformative process. Well, I say been through, I am going through. The journey there is no end point. I think one of the biggest illusions that I had this idea somehow that we reach enlightenment or self-realization. I had lots of images and ideas around that, and then somehow that was just arriving, and there you are.
Yes.
And then I realized, oh, that's actually the start line.
Yes, it's an ongoing process, isn't it?
It's an ongoing process, and so really the process is about challenging our beliefs and ideas about everything.
Yes.
It really is the end of our world on so many levels, and that's still happening. Still happening.
Shavasti, we're out of time now. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for getting up at 5 in the morning and for forgiving me for calling you an Australian.
Oh, that's all right. There's nothing wrong with Australians. I just wanted to be factual.
Well, thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much indeed.
Bye-bye. And Shavasti's book is called Embracing the Power of Truth, Tools for Liberating Your Heart, and it's published by Findhorn Press, available on Amazon and at all good bookstores. That's it for now. Stay tuned. We will be back in a few moments.